It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you reach out to me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Now, if you like our show, be sure and check out the Patreon, the Opperman Report Patreon. Everything here Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio you can find over at the Patreon, and with all the ads and the commercials cut out. Plus, I always put up exclusive content and free content. There's free content on Patreon. You should check it out whenever you get a chance. I just put up the 14 states sued Trump over the I forget what one. So much is going on. You can't keep up. But I have the 14 states lawsuit against Trump there, against one of his recent orders. I forget what it was. And then also, too, we do a live show Friday night at Spreaker.com. You go to Spreaker.com. You sign up for free. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content. And I play repeats every single night of the week. I tell you, I'm really excited about today's guest. We have Gene J. Finns on the show. You can find him at genefinns.com. He's written 14 books you can find on Amazon. But the one we're talking about today is The Sovereign Citizen Ideology. The book is called I Do Not Consent, simplifying the sovereign citizen ideology. And, you know, we've been talking about that quite a bit on the show lately, these sovereign citizens and these Moors that came out of nowhere all of a sudden. They recite the same script. Mr. Gene J. Finns, are you there, sir?
I am. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, thank you so much.
Good evening.
No, it's afternoon here. Now, before we get into your book here, I Do Not Consent, The Sovereign Citizen Ideology, tell us about yourself. Who is Gene J. Finns?
Well, you know, I'm a retired auctioneer, and we used to do estate auctions, and oftentimes the kinds of auctions that we'd set up were kind of big and sort of bordered on zoning laws. Some communities didn't like the size of the auction events that we would set up, and so I sort of became aware of walking on the line between regulation and violating regulation. And that sort of gave rise to my interest in the prospect of sovereign citizens and how sovereign citizens believe that they can select which laws they're going to abide by and which laws they're not. And as things evolved, of course, I've retired from auctioneering, but my interest in sovereign citizens hasn't waned. And so I started watching. I initially started watching YouTube videos on the subject and became kind of addicted and began over the course of a couple of years jotting down questions I had about weird things that sovereign citizens would say to police and to judges. And I began a program of researching each of these weird things and giving myself a tremendous education as to the roots of sovereign citizenship, an oxymoron in itself. You can't be a sovereign and be a citizen. So from that came the book, which I've had a lot of fun. It was a great experience to write it, and it's been well received. I was going to do some advertising on YouTube, contacted Google to advertise my book on sovereign citizen videos. But, you know, Google's got this huge bureaucracy, so I decided it would be more efficient to set up my own YouTube channel. So now I've got a YouTube channel that puts out sovereign citizen videos one a day, and in each I advertise the book, and it's been a great hit. We've been selling a lot of books and having a lot of fun. It's quite an interesting offshoot of American society.
Sure.
About 500,000 strong.
There's a bunch of real characters, yeah. But now, what is your YouTube channel, though? I forgot to ask you.
Sovereign Citizen Situations.
Sovereign
I like
Citizen
alliteration.
Situations.
Sovereign Citizen Situations, yeah. And I only started a couple of months ago. I have about, 60 or 70 videos up, but I religiously put up one a day. And they're a lot of fun. And they continue to be amusing and educational. I mean, it's just
some are kind of sad too.
Yeah.
You know, some are kind of sad too. You know, these people, like, they can't get along with the cops. They're getting their car window broken. You know, they're just and it's something like that guy Eric Martin. You know, like one case after another. And that fellow now Magoo, in Judge Simpson's court.
You know, I have a video about Eric Martin, as a matter of fact. Yeah, it's so strange. They have such a sense of self-assurance. Yeah. I mean, lawyers don't go into court with the kind of self-assurance that these sovereign citizens do. It's they profess knowledge that they don't have. They quote laws that don't exist. They lecture judges. They lecture cops. They threaten cops with lawsuits. The sense of certainty that they seem to carry around is what boggles my mind. And the result can be kind of dramatic, as you're suggesting. They get windows broken and contempt of court and jail. I put up a video recently of literally a grandfather refers to his grandkids in the encounter with police, but lectures the police about how he's not getting out of his car and how the police are violating the Constitution, and goes on and on and on. And lo and behold, a 75-year-old guy gets dragged out of his car and arrested. So go figure. You know, you'd think with age comes wisdom, but the sovereign citizen movement seems to cross all boundaries.
I'd say it's like talking to inside baseball here, because I'm sure a lot of people have no idea what we're talking about. You know what I mean? So why don't we start with the basics? What is a sovereign citizen, or now I guess we have the Moors too?
Yes, we do. It's a good question. Sovereign citizens, there were about, at last count, about 500,000 Americans. And incidentally, the movement is also expanding into Canada and Great Britain and Australia. But there are about 500,000 Americans who subscribe to an ideology that suggests that they can exempt themselves from U.S. citizenship to the extent that they're not bound by any of the laws of the United States. They believe that the Constitution gives them freedoms to do virtually anything that they want, that they're born in America with this natural freedom, and that their name is assigned to them by the government, which is why it's always in all uppercase letters rather than upper and lowercase. And they reject that entire ideology. They aspire to believing that they are free, independent entities, can denounce all elements of their citizenship, and hence be immune from having to subscribe to any of the laws or regulations or taxes that all of us normal people are bound by. and they do it with such a sense of certainty and assurance that they're right. That to me is the fascinating part, you know.
It seems like the biggest thing they're trying to get out from doing is registering their cars. You know what I mean? That's their main goal.
And paying taxes. Yeah. And there are a lot of them that squat in real estate and maintain that they can this land is their land, especially the Moorish Americans to whom you made reference. The Moorish Americans are a sect of sovereign citizens that began in the 90s with the establishment of a Moorish American temple. They believe that they're originally from Morocco and that they are native to the land of the United States prior to Native Americans, and that Americans are therefore, the laws are therefore intrusive upon their Moorish American society. Incidentally, there are no records whatsoever, no archaeological records, nothing that suggests that Moroccans were ever here historically, but they maintain that they were here, and therefore they're immune from American law. But whether they're Moorish Americans or plain old sovereign citizens, they expect police to protect them. They expect maintenance of the roads. They expect all of the perks of being an American, but reject the prospect of having to pay their fair share. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to register their cars. They don't have to pay insurance. So their beliefs go. And they take these 1 or 2 line extractions from the Constitution, or the Uniform Commercial Code, which really has nothing to do with law. It regulates commercial transactions. They take these 1 or 2 line extractions and they form arguments as to why this proves that they're now not bound to follow the law.
Yeah, they have it memorized too. These different UCCs, and they have it all memorized.
They do, and they carry papers. They carry volumes of papers in their car, and they open it. They typically open their car windows when they stop. They open their car windows, their papers through to the cop. And in my book, is a whole section on how police agencies and the FBI and Homeland Security and the University of North Carolina is training FBI agents and judges on how to deal with sovereign citizens, because the movement is growing exponentially, and there's a lot of concern with law enforcement as to how to deal with these guys, because they there have been, there's been violence, although it tends not to be typical. Sometimes the encounter becomes so confrontational that there are problems with violence. So it's quite a fascinating movement, at least fascinating to me.
How did this come? How did this Gene J. Fins? How does this get on your radar? When did you first discover this whole phenomenon?
There's a certain. I think I grew up, as many of us did, with a certain sense of, especially as a kid, with a certain sense of rebelliousness. Rebelling against. I'm a child of the '60s. Peace and love. Police were the enemy, and so you coming out of that era, there was a certain sense of rebelliousness toward authority. And, I think it's still alive and well with sovereign citizens. These are folks who seem to be excited by the prospect of being able to escape laws and regulations. And so I guess my own appeal to it is the fact that it sort of recalls my own sense of rebelliousness, both in the auction business and even prior to that as a former peace and love hippie of the 1960s. So it sort of touches a nerve. And quite frankly, I think that Trump may have had an influence on the sovereign citizen movement, in that he has made the prospect of not being bound by rules and laws and convention and tradition kind of fashionable. And
also, too, his followers are so out of touch with reality. Like, they actually think they're going to get a $5,000 check from Elon Musk for they're rooting out fraud and waste, and they're going to get a check for this.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. They want. Yeah, Trump is going to give them a share of the savings. It really is. It's just, and I think it's that kind of suggestion of autonomy that is sparking, this movement. The fact is, it's grown exponentially in the last decade or so. It's really become a threat, and it's gone all over the world. Obviously, they don't in Britain. They don't quote the Constitution, but they found other 1 or 2 line extractions from parliamentary rules and regulations and law that they can use as arguments to maintain their sovereignty.
Oh yeah,
I have a couple of videos of Aussies in Australia doing the same thing. In one video that I put up recently, a guy is handing the Australian cop his fee schedule for being unlawfully detained. He's going to charge by the moment, and he announces as he passes it through the window, "You've been served." He serves his fee schedule on the cop. It's really just an amazing set of beliefs, and it's.
Oh yeah, this was huge in Ireland. I used to be on a station in Ireland called People's Internet Radio, and every other host on there was into this sovereign stuff, man. And over there, they use it for.
Is that right?
Yeah, over there, the big thing over there is to get out of paying your rent, to evictions. That's what they're doing over there. Over here, it just seems to be the stuff in the cars mostly.
Well, that's the stuff in the cars was featured, but quite frankly, they also are involved in real estate and rent. Their claim is that this is their land, especially the Moorish Americans. This is their land, and so if they choose a building that is on their land, so be it. This is America is Morocco. Many of them exclaim, and therefore anything that's on American soil belongs to them as a Moorish American. It's really profound. And if you see, if you watch any single sovereign citizen in action, you're quick to write it off. He's nuts. But everything that he's saying has become so uniform among the 500,000 of them that it's it can be described as nothing less than a movement.
Well, then where are they all going to get? Because they all read that same exact script. I'm not driving, I'm traveling. The subject matter jurisdiction. They're all reading the exact same. So where are they getting that from? Is there a clearinghouse for this?
Moorish Americans are organized. They set up a temple in Newark, New Jersey, in the 1990s, and there are even vendors that sell Moorish American passports and diplomatic immunity papers and all kinds of strange stuff. Other than the Moorish Americans, the sovereign citizens are just passing it from person to person. There are websites that give advice. There are, quote, sovereign citizen counselors, some of whom have been convicted for practicing law without a license, who give legal advice. They charge by the hour for consultation, and I guess that's where the learning begins, off of these websites. There are some YouTube channels that profess that you don't need to pay your registration, that if you're paying for your car registration or for your car insurance, you're a sucker, because the American government has you snowballed into believing that it's necessary and that's required. It's really not. All you have to do when you see a judge is say, and that paralyzes the judge. So they believe. It's the strangest thing, and yet they fail time after time after time after time. No record of success anywhere. The only successes that you come upon with sovereign citizens is when the cop or the judge becomes so obviously disgusted with the whole prospect that they just wash their hands and walk away. When I post a video of a sovereign citizen who at the end of a 30 or 40-minute encounter is told by the cop has withdrawn to his car a couple of times during this encounter on the radio or whatever. Finally, after 30 or 40 minutes, may return to the window of the sovereign citizen's car, which of course, as we mentioned, is only open 1 inch, and tells the guy, "Okay, you can go." Meantime, he was pulled over for no license plate. He has no registration, has never produced his driver's license during the entire encounter, and the cop just says, "Okay, you can go." I don't know what the motivation is. I know that when I put up one of those videos, the responses, the comments are such so uniformly angry that these cops are not doing what they're supposed to do. But when there are victories, it seems to be that the cop or the judge just decides it's not worth their time, and they dismiss the case, or the cop just tells them, "Okay, leave." And this bolsters their belief that what they're believing and saying is yielding success, when in fact, in one of 100 occasions, it's just producing a disgusted cop or a disgusted judge that throws up their hands and says, "Leave me alone."
Unless the cop takes a personal interest and gets pissed off, so it turns into a pissing contest between him and the driver. There really is no reason to take this guy in. You know what I mean? Like, for what reason, man? Nothing's going to come out of it. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Well, the thing is, the frustration seems to be, at least among my small but growing audience on YouTube, the frustration seems to be that a cop will spend 30 minutes, call for backup, get 2 or 3 or 4 more cops. There are 4 or 5 cops standing around the car for 30 minutes. I mean, when you think hourly what this is costing the community, in terms of salary, and then after 30 minutes of this nonsense, tells the guy, "Okay, drive off, you can leave." And that seems to be sparking the frustration among the normal people, because if you can let the guy go, let him go in 30 seconds and save us all of that money.
Yeah, the other standard practice too is they demand to talk to a supervisor right away. Let me get your supervisor. So now you're even a supervisor. His time is taken on too.
That's right.
Show up at the scene,
That's right.
Oh man.
They also, and when they go as high in the ranks of the police force that the cop will let them, sometimes a chief of police shows up, then they insist on the sheriff. Because I have a chapter in the book about the fact that many believe that the sheriff is the only legitimate law enforcement authority, and because cops are not elected but rather hired, they have no authority.
Yeah, the cops are policy enforcers. There is such a thing. Policy enforcers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whereas the sheriff is, because he's elected, represents the people and is therefore authorized to. So when all else fails, they'll say, "Get me the sheriff." And generally by then the cops are so disgusted. They ain't accommodating with anything.
They'll call 911 from inside the car.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And I just put up a video like that where the husband is arguing with the cop, and you can hear the wife in the background arguing with the 911 dispatcher. She has it on speakerphone, and ultimately the 911 dispatcher says, "You better listen to the cop that's standing by your window." So it's really quite a phenomenon. I find it really amusing and entertaining, and sometimes sad, as you suggested, because especially in the case of vulnerable people or people who are not particularly bright, which I guess it could be argued none of them are, but many of them are quite articulate and have studied their tales well. They know the script well. Others just have no concept of what's going on. I have a video of a 17-year-old who keeps expressing frustration that the cop is interrupting him. I mean, the kid literally got his license the same year that he adopted the sovereign citizen. The kid is ultimately saved from jail because his father shows up on the scene and expresses some embarrassment and cooperation and provides the kid's identification. So, the cop becomes empathetic and lets the kid go. But it covers all ages and all levels of IQ, and I'm just fascinated by the whole thing. And apparently, the book has been accepted by fans like me as a sort of a guide. These strange things that they do and say, I've tried to sort of decode. So it's like somebody referred to it as a Google translator of the strange things that sovereign citizens throw around like confetti.
Yeah, like the chapters are like frequently asked questions, so you can just scroll right down the number of chapters here, and any top, like all cap letters, right? That's one of their things, is that when they receive their summons, they're not the same person as the all capital letters in the court paperwork.
It's amazing. They argue that capital letters were assigned to them at birth by the government, and so anything that's all capital letters connotes government, makes them an entity rather than a person. That's why they keep insisting, I'm not a person, I'm a living, breathing man. Because there's a distinction between being a person, which is a subject of the government, and a living, breathing man, a free man on the land. They sometimes call themselves a free man rather than a sovereign citizen. It's really quite to me, it's just thoroughly fascinating.
Yeah, the all caps is the name fiction. It's the fictitious name, right? Oh, but exactly. they also too think, I don't know about the Moors. I don't think they're onto this yet. But some of them think that when they get that name on your birth certificate, that birth certificate is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and there's some kind of value in it. That guy Sean David Martin, man, he used to say that all the time. That he was able to get his name off the thing back, and he got his stock money back from the stock market. God.
There's a claim among some that the United States, when the United States came off the gold standard in the 1930s, that the government spread all of the assets among all American assets among Americans. When it changed from the gold standard to paper currency, all of the gold, a portion of the gold was attributed to each person in the country. And so some sovereign citizens argue that that there's a fund for them in the Treasury. And it's from that fund in the Treasury that they're allowed to pay their bills. They can pay their rent by giving a note to the landlord, collectible from the U.S. Treasury. It's really quite an interesting phenomenon to me. I never cease to be fascinated by some of the arguments.
Yeah, they have websites where you can go and buy like a coupon for $200 and then pay off a $10,000 debt with it. You just print it out and mail it in.
You know what's fascinating is the entrepreneurialism that it sparks, especially among the Moorish Americans. You can buy a diplomatic passport for $400. The Moorish temple will sell you a diplomatic passport, which makes you immune from enforcement because you're a diplomat, and I guess they believe that it allows you to travel. Although I would dare one to show it at an airline counter, expecting to be able to leave the country.
So another one, too, is subject matter jurisdiction. Now, Gene Fins, you've been around, okay? You've probably been involved in a couple of lawsuits in your time. And the first paragraph of any complaint is you establish jurisdiction. We're in the court of New York State because this offense took place in New York.
Right.
It's the most basic thing to establish what the jurisdiction is. But they just think that by repeating subject matter jurisdiction, like it's like a fancy secret thing. You know what I mean?
And nowhere is there law that suggests that the court has to prove jurisdiction to the litigant. So even when they insist that they're not under the court's jurisdiction because jurisdiction has been established, there's no law that suggests that the litigant has to be advised of their jurisdiction. So it's such a strange. Darrell Brooks. I don't know if you.
I was addicted to that thing, man. I've watched it like 3 times. I've watched the whole trial about 3 times. Okay,
it's unreal. He sort of coined the phrase "subject matter jurisdiction." He's the classic sovereign citizen.
Yeah, and he had no idea what he was talking about. You know.
No, he really didn't.
Yeah.
He really didn't. Most don't, frankly. I mean, most of them have latched on to some single line of the Constitution or the UCC, which has no applicability to begin with, and they believe that somehow exempts them from whatever argument a cop or a prosecutor is making. It's just this, living under this cloud of self-righteousness that fascinates me.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating. These people are definitely fascinating for sure, and I can see where a lot of people are making money off them too, because it's like a giant funnel. You know, like you're filling in with the most gullible people around who are trying to get away with something. So that's a money making operation if you can get all those people into your website. They take advantage of them. They
sell them things, and they give counsel by the hour.
Yeah.
I mean, until they get locked up for practicing law without a license, but they offer counsel. They counsel people as to what cockamamie line or phrase or theory is going to save them, and they charge for this education by the hour.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see when they're pulled
maybe
over.
We're in the wrong business, you and me.
Yeah, I know. But sometimes when they're pulled over, they're in the car talking to their guru, who's telling them what to do.
That's right. That's right. I have a video of a woman who literally is pushing the phone. It's on speakerphone, and she's pushing the phone in the cop's face, so her counselor should be able to hear every word that the cop is saying. Just amazing.
Now, one of these things you hear these guys talk about all the time is the Corporation of the United States. Why don't you give us a little background on that? A lot of it has to do with the conversion from the gold standard. Their claim is that when we went from the gold standard to paper currency, it all became fictitious.
and that the United States, instead of being a republic, became a business corporation. And as a corporation, everything and everybody is a shareholder or an employee. They argue, so says the government. And therefore, they can rebel against the corporation that is the United States by simply disavowing it. They can send documents to the Motor Vehicle Bureau and to the Secretary of State, disclaiming any contract that they may previously have signed, and in so doing, they believe they remove themselves from the jurisdiction of the corporation. Now they are sovereign. It's just a fascinating.
I think I went to paralegal school. I got associates in paralegal studies. And one of the first things we learned about the United States corporation is that, well, of course they have to form a corporation. How else would they get a bank account? They would get the bank account under Donald J. Trump's personal, his personal name. Right? You gotta have an entity, to write checks, to deposit checks, all this kind of stuff. It's just the craziest stuff, man.
It really is. A lot of it has to do with sovereign citizens are not particularly organized. The Moorish Americans, that group, which is sort of, a sect of the sovereign citizen movement, has some degree of organization, but sovereign citizens themselves are not organized, but they model themselves after an organization that evolved in like the mid-1950s that was quite organized, called the Posse Comitatus. Right. Which was headed by a guy. It means it refers to a group acting as an individual, and it was organized by a guy who ultimately died in prison for tax evasion, who claimed that pretty much the same arguments that the United States ceased to be a republic and is now a corporation. And this Posse Comitatus was a far right movement. It was the organizer who, as I say, died in prison in the 1980s for tax evasion. He was a renowned anti-Semite. He was one of the founding members of the Ku Klux Klan, and his claim was that you simply rebelled against government because government was the enemy. And that was somewhat organized. It kind of died when he died in the 80s. But then in the late 90s, echoes of his gospel started resounding as the sovereign citizen movement. And sovereign citizen movement isn't organized, but considering that it isn't organized, it's amazing how well and how thoroughly they're able to communicate the script to each other. They all say the same beliefs. My suspicion is that some of them don't really understand what they're saying. They're repeating words, but others seem to have it fairly well reasoned. And the reasoning is bogus. But they've given it some thought. They've taken lines of the Constitution and they've extracted them to make them fit. And some of them seem to be quite clever.
You know what, though, man?
Albeit unsuccessful.
I'm involved in a lot of litigation, and especially when you see in divorce cases, one of the litigants will get consumed with the process, and they want to know more than the lawyers, and they just get consumed with all the little details of it. They become addicted to the process, and they put winning the process over their goal in the case. They get custody of their kids. They're more focused on winning the case rather than just making settlements, and to be able to see your kid and visit your kid and stuff like that. They get consumed with the process, and these sovereign guys, man, these Moors, they're definitely into that.
Yeah. And sovereign citizens are as well. That makes a lot of sense. In fact, there's a chapter in the book about various Supreme Court cases in which the Supreme Court has argued that merely because someone has sovereign citizen beliefs doesn't exempt him from the responsibility to pay taxes or from the responsibility to insure his automobile. And their argument, as you're suggesting, is really kind of dismissive of the reasoning. They simply say, just because you believe something doesn't exempt you from rules and regulations. And that's sort of, you know, the Supreme Court has been fairly succinct in suggesting simply that your interest in a particular topic doesn't count. And that's sort of what you're suggesting with you know, your divorce example.
Yeah. Well, and when you think, we were talking about Darrell Brooks before too. If you watch the whole trial, it was like, you know, he would show up in the morning and with full soft-sit, man. I'm surprised he wasn't wearing a fez, you know what I mean? But he was just in a full mode. But then by the end of the day, he was trying to copy the prosecution. He was trying to figure his way out through the process. Then he would go back to jail, talk to somebody on the phone or talk to somebody in the next cell or whatever, and come back the next day, full-blown again back to square one. So he had to be getting coached by somebody.
What's so amazing to me is the fact that there's so much repetition and so much self-assurance, despite the fact that they never, ever prevail. The closest that they come to prevailing is when a cop or a judge just decides it's not worth their time. The cop lets them drive off, and so their assumption is that they prevailed, when in fact the cop just decided he had better things to do. So, yeah, they repeat the same thing again and again and again, despite the fact that there's absolutely no record of success with it.
Wait, how about what's your name and badge number?
Yeah, right. And some of them argue that it's the law that you tell me. It's the law you tell me. It's the law that you get me a supervisor when I demand one.
But then they'll ask for the name and badge number like 8 times. They didn't write it down the first time.
It's true. It's true. And often, you know, it's suggested, at least there's a chapter in the book that talks about the various training that the FBI and Homeland Security and police departments are putting their law enforcement agents through. And in it, they caution against the repetition of sovereign citizens, arguing that it's often just to distract, just to throw something out, to keep the cop from concentrating on the issue. Which I suspect in many cases that's the deal. Also, you know, when they come to a fork in the road where they don't quite know what to do, there's always a quote they can pull out, like name and badge number. Get me a supervisor.
Yeah,
you're violating my constitutional rights.
Okay. Oh, what about this? I'm noticing this thing now. I am the executor of the trust. What is that about?
Yeah, they in order for them to be sovereign, the individual has to be exempted from all rules and regulations, and so their argument is that there's an entity that the government has assigned them, all capital letters, names on a birth certificate, social security numbers. They've become an entity. And to distance themselves from that entity, the estate or the trust, they become a breathing, living man, a representative of the estate or the trust. And so when they appear in court, they're appearing as the representative of the trust, the beneficiary of the trust, anything they can do to distance themselves from the legal entity created with their name in capital letters by the government. They were assigned a name in all capital letters by the government. Their real name, assigned by their parents, is upper and lowercase. Many of them argue they have no last name because the last name is something that was assigned by the government. Only their first name will they reveal. So the trust is another mechanism by which they distance themselves from the government, or try to.
Do they actually create a trust, or they make one up?
No. No. Yeah, they just say that one exists. And some of them suggest that the judge is the trustee of their estate,
right?
And so the judge has to act in a fiduciary capacity on their behalf. It's in many cases, you see a judge on YouTube. You watch these court hearings, many of which I have on my channel, where the judge asks for their name, and they say, "I'm the representative of the estate of John of the Smith family." And he said, "Well, I need to speak with John Smith, not a representative of John Smith. I need to speak with John Smith." "Well, I am the representative of," and they just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it to the extent that the judge finally says, "Well, if you're not going to admit to being John Smith, then John Smith has not appeared. And because John Smith has not appeared, I'm issuing a bench warrant for his failure to appear, and John Smith will be arrested." And as the sovereign citizen then begins to panic, the judge will often say, "Okay, we're through for today." And if it's a Zoom hearing, that's the end of it. And the guy then just waits for somebody to knock on his door and arrest him. So it's, there are no rewards for this
there really
sovereign citizen.
I was telling you about that station I was on. One of the other hosts tells me one time, it was like an on-air discussion, and he's telling me that he never entered the well of the court. So he never actually appeared in court for his thing, and they dismissed it. I says, "Dude, if you never appeared in court, you have a failure to appear warrant. I guarantee it." And they did. True. They pulled him over like a year later. They arrested him for the warrant,
I know there have been arguments where speaking of the well of the court, they stand in the gallery where the people sit, and there's usually a little gate that swings open.
Yeah.
And they stand behind the gate in the gallery presenting their argument, and the judge says, "Step up and sit at the defendant's table." Their argument being, just like you suggested, that if they enter the well of the court, they're somehow submitting to the court's authority, whereas if they enter the courtroom door but don't open that gate, they haven't. It's just much of it is ludicrous.
Yeah.
But
well, what about the stuff about admiralty law?
Yeah, maritime law, admiralty law, it's a ruse. It's a ruse. There's really no basis for it. Admiralty law, maritime law involves ships and boats, and where it comes from, there's really no root of it, other than the fact that it's sort of been passed around. It's a popular argument. Is this an admiralty court? We'll talk about common law, as if common law is something. Common law is just an evolution of law, an evolution of court interpretations of law and decisions that courts have made. So common law is ever evolving by its very nature. It's ever evolving. So common law and admiralty law. It's just.
I tell you, well, I'm reading through the chapter titles, and I can't stop laughing because the other one is "I do not consent." They think it's like saying like home base. I do not consent. It's like being on home base. You can get away with anything.
Yeah, like a game of tag.
Yeah.
They have to contract. They have to contract with the government unless they've specifically. They're not bound by the government's authority. So they remind the court or the cop that they do not consent to the arrest, or they do not consent to the contempt charge, and therefore they're not a subject of the contract.
And they're usually screaming that out as their windows getting broken, as they're getting dragged out of the carpet in handcuffs. I did not consent. I did not consent.
Yeah, they're being thrown to the ground. I do not consent. And sometimes the cop, just reminds them, you don't need to consent to being arrested. I understand that you don't consent, but get in the back of the patrol car. There is no success. The strange phenomenon is that, popular though it is and growing in popularity, they have no real success to fall back on. The only successes that they seem to pass around are those instances where the cop finally says, okay, get out of here. that they deem to be success, when in fact their arguments never prevail.
No, if you ever
something can be as popular.
Yeah, if you ever have to go to court, you sit through all the arraignments and you hear one of these guys, going through their spiel. Or another time, I've told the story many times where I had to sit through that competency court all day long, and there was like 80 defendants that were being evaluated for their competency. And that's when I first heard about Moores, from those guys. I think there's a lot of this in jail and prison, the word of mouth, that some people, they're spreading it in there, that they think this works. I know another place where
notable that they're doing it. Notable that they're doing it in jail.
Right.
That's how successful it is.
Right. And also, a couple of years ago, when the Rainbow family was in town, the Ocala Rainbow family, and I ran into a couple of those guys, and they were saying this sovereign stuff. They thought it worked, and they showed me one of the YouTube videos of that guy with the feather in his hat, the old man. And they were saying that one worked.
Yeah. Carrying some kind of a stick with feathers on it.
Right, that guy, yeah.
Is that the guy you're talking about?
Yeah. The Constitution of 1876.
Yeah. It's a very strange phenomenon, and what's so curious about it is that it should be so widespread, despite the fact that they have no basis for success. There's no, they say this works and this will work and this will disable the judge and this will stop the cop, but it's never worked.
Yeah.
So it's being adopted by more and more and more people without any reference or testimony to the fact that it's effective. It's a very strange, to me, a fascinating environment. I mean, it would be great if we could select which laws we want to abide by and which laws we don't, which rules apply to us and which rules don't.
Yeah.
That would be utopian. Pay what you feel like paying and don't pay what you don't want to pay. But society doesn't work that way. We have.
And
we do have of the masses.
We do have constitutional rights, and it would be great if we could stand on those. I've done a lot of criminal defense work, and back in the 80s and the 90s, Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizure, was your go-to defense, and now it's just worthless. Here in Florida, all the cop has to say is he smells the odor of marijuana, he can search your car on his. I smell it, and that's enough to search your car, man. It's just, we're losing a lot of freedoms and a lot of rights, man.
That's what sovereigns are saying.
Yeah.
and I guess it's true. I mean, there are good cops and bad cops, and never would I suggest that every cop is decent, but what do you do without them? I mean, how do you function when there are no enforcers? So it's really a fine line.
It is. So as far as this the Moores topic here, is there anything I haven't asked you want the audience to know about?
No, not much. I'm sort of fascinated with Moors because the Moorish Americans have taken it to the next level. They, based on this argument that they were here first, they have passports and they have diplomatic immunity and diplomatic papers. I mean, and work permits, tax exempt certificates, all of these things you can buy online, where they have much more certification available, Moorish Americans, than regular sovereign citizens. You can buy pretty much anything you want from some entrepreneur, Moorish American entrepreneur that's going to make money off it. But they're in the same group. The basis for their argument is that they are not subject to law. It's amusing and it's scary, and what are you going to do?
Been talking to Gene J. Finz, Finz. His website is genefinz.com, and it's Gene with a G, Gene. And his YouTube channel is Sovereign Citizens Situation. Now, Gene, if you go on Amazon here, you've written about 14 books. on a quite variety of different topics. This one here was about kissing. What was it? How to pick up women.
Yeah.
Another one here, the art of kissing.
The retro reflections. What I did, I've always been into antiques as an auctioneer. My first auctions were antique auctions. I just love antiques, and so I did 10 little short books written in a manner of the 1930s. About the art of kissing, a suitor's guide to matrimony. They're written in 1930s lingo, with the innocence of the 1930s, and there's 10 of them, and they were a fun series to produce, and they're selling fairly well. They generally, somebody who buys one buys all 10. They're like $4.95 a piece, which is sort of a 1930s price. And it was sort of a fun thing. And the mafia and how the mafia is affecting our current society from the 1930s. A survival guide to the Great Depression. Prostitution in our current society and what FDR is doing about it. And just little books that sort of are novelties and reminiscent.
The Great Depression, a survival guide. I guess you can put that in reprint now, right?
Pretty much. A lot hasn't changed.
Yeah.
FDR doesn't have a lot of impact on it, but otherwise, a lot is the same.
And you wrote a couple of books about Trump. What are those about?
Yeah. What I did was when Trump was first, when the flurry of there were the four indictments. Yeah. Consumed about 250 pages of legal argument. And what I did was I took all 250 pages, the four documents, and summarized them into plain English. The total 250-page total writings I reduced to about 50 pages of plain English, paragraph by paragraph, so people could appreciate exactly what it was that he was being charged with. And it went fairly well. In fact, the book was selling very well until a talking head on MSNBC, whose name escapes me, but one of the regular guests on MSNBC wrote virtually the same book. And because I don't look over the sales of mine, but it was fun to write, and it was really quite intense. I mean, Trump was under it for a while. It looked as though all four were going to succeed based on how they were written. But yeah. Obviously, we know what history produced. I also did a kid's book about Trump. I was wondering, it bothers me to this day how the things that he's done and the things that he said, separating, particularly in his first term, separating children from their families, and I'm trying to think of the other 9 things that I cited, but 10 things that would be difficult to explain to a kid. Mm-hmm. I took these 10 things of Trump's and tried to put them in terms that a child could understand, and created some arguments that Trump would put forth in defense of what he did, and created a children's book, and that also has done fairly well. That's selling now. The book about the indictments of Trump is sort of old news, but the children's book is selling.
It's not old news around here because my sponsor, my client Keith Davidson, actually testified at that trial, and I know most of the people that did that deal with the Stormy Daniels deal, Gina Rodriguez and all those characters that pulled that deal off. So we talk about that here all the time.
Is that right?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. Okay, and
it's.
That one is called From Power to Penitentiary, A Titan's Path to Prison.
Right,
yeah.
Right. You're right. And it literally has all 4 indictments in their full length. And then the first part of the book, the first 50 pages of the book is a chapter by chapter summary, or a paragraph by paragraph summary of each of the documents. And the first half of the book, paragraph by paragraph, refers to the later page in the book where you can actually read the paragraph that it's summarizing. So, in a matter of 2 hours, you can sort of digest all 250 pages of legal writings that were done by the, in the four indictments. It was really fun to produce. It gave me quite an education, and I'm told it's provided an education to a lot of the people that have read it. I also did one on real estate. I have a real estate broker's license, and for years I was marketing real estate. I did a lot of real estate auctions, and I had a number of agents under me at one point, and would edit all of their ads or help them write ads. And so I put together a book of how to write a real estate ad, which is principally a book of, 1,000 or 2,000 words or phrases that people can sort of highlight and string together to make dramatic ads. And that's selling well as well.
Yeah, so once again, check out
really
Gene Finns on Amazon there. And all the books seem to have like 4.5 stars right up there. It's at genefinns.com, and it has a link to all the different books. The YouTube channel is Sovereign Citizen Situation. It's always good for a laugh.
Sovereign Citizen Situations.
Yeah, it's always good for a laugh to watch some of those videos, man.
Yeah.
So Gene, my friend, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Another book comes out. Give me a call.
I certainly will, Ed, and it was fun chatting with you. Thanks so much.
It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be, so thank you, too. Okay. Good night.
Good night.